Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was a pretty great movie. I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed all the fan service, of course, and the fact that it reenacted Sonic Adventure 2, which is probably the video game that I spent the most time playing, aside from maybe Smash Bros. There's countless hours I spent playing that game when I was younger, and it was pretty nostalgic and pretty great to see the story reenacted. That being said, I decided I would take a different stance, a different perspective than most people I see. I'm going to analyze this movie from a more philosophical stance. My videos nowadays are very philosophical, so I figured, hey, might as well, mix my two things. I love Sonic the Hedgehog, and I love to read about philosophy and whatnot. So I'm going to probably analyze this in a way that you probably won't see other people analyze it, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. So I would say that the philosophical crutch of this movie is, what kind of person do I want to become, right? What kind of person do I want to become by doing the actions that I'm doing? Am I going to rise above my pain, or am I going to succumb to the pain and allow that pain to consume me and allow it to overcome any goodwill that may have been thrown to me in my life? At the very beginning of the movie, Tom says, "Hey, Sonic, you don't let your actions change who you are inside your lungs," which they, of course, inside your heart, which Sonic then jokes around and said, "Oh, it's in my lungs," but no, it's in the heart. And we see that paralleled with Shadow, how the death of Maria totally changed him. He was a scientific lab rat before, and afterwards, after the lab incident, and after Maria died, he started blaming humans for the unhappiness and the terrible life he was living, because the one beacon of hope that he had in his life, which was Maria, is now gone. And also Gerald Robotnik was also kind of his friend, sort of, and he wasn't gone, I guess. He was gone, yeah. He didn't die, but he was left in prison. So then later on, we see Sonic is in a similar predicament, wherein Shadow ostensibly kills Tom, who is the human stand-in for Sonic, and it's sort of supposed to parallel the fact that, okay, Shadow is who Sonic could have been if he didn't have Tom there to be a moral guide for him, and he succumbed to the darkness that he was perhaps slated to get into. Like, if Sonic was discovered by scientists as opposed to be on the run like he was in the first movie, and he was experimented on, and he started to just really hate that, started to see himself like an animal, like this scientific lab creature that Shadow was taken as, dehumanized is the best way to put it. And he didn't have Tom, then he likely would have become Shadow, which is what they're implying. Yes, Sonic and Shadow have like different temperaments, and they probably would have enacted that, probably would have embodied the darkness in different ways, because Sonic is just more extroverted and Shadow is extremely introverted. But the idea is probably still true when they're trying to get at that idea, and that's the philosophical and thematic crutch of the drama between Sonic and Shadow. So then we have a moment where the space colony Ark is flown into space, and Shadow and Eggman are about to destroy the world, and then Sonic is like, "I need to use the Chaos Emeralds now," and Knuckles is like, "Hey, your heart is dark right now, you shouldn't be using the Chaos Emeralds." And Sonic is like, "This is the only option, we have to do this." And Knuckles, he doesn't want to do it, but he reluctantly lets Sonic take the Chaos Emeralds, or gets the Master Emerald in this thing, and he just goes off into space, and he's like, "Alright, I'm going to take this down, I'm going to destroy Shadow because he killed Tom," which is like his father figure, and then we get Super Sonic versus Shadow, and then we get Super Shadow versus Super Sonic, and then Sonic gets really angry, then he punches the Chaos Emeralds out of Shadow, and then we get Super Sonic with his fist right in front of Shadow's face, and he's about to just end it and kill Shadow, but then Shadow accidentally reminds him of the fact that, he's hit him in the heart, which is reminds him of what Tom said at the beginning, and that's the climax of the movie, so to speak. That's the turning point of Sonic and Shadow's character. So Sonic's decision to spare Shadow is not simply an act of mercy. It's not like he was, "Oh, I'm just being merciful to Shadow because I don't want to kill him." It's actually a reflection of his unshakable moral character, his unshakable moral ideals that he bequeathed from Tom. And this lines up with what Aristotle called virtue ethics. Virtue ethics has to do with not necessarily what is right and wrong. You could argue that Sonic was actually right in trying to kill Shadow, because Shadow not only killed Tom, but he also killed probably a bunch of other people, and he was going to destroy the entire world. So, Sonic probably was justified, realistically speaking. Sonic would have been justified in taking Shadow's life there to save the world and to enact some kind of vengeance, because Shadow probably would try and get in his way to try and stop the world, and Sonic was just countering that, and he was also giving him justice for what he probably actually deserved. And no one else could give Shadow justice, of course, because he's too powerful. Sonic was the only one who was able to do that. So, arguably, you could very much argue that Sonic was in the right to take out Shadow there. But, as per Aristotle's virtue ethics, Sonic was concerned with the kind of person he was becoming by doing that action. By, killing Shadow. So by sparing Shadow, Sonic demonstrates a profound understanding that his choices define his character. And in this movie, the kind of person that Sonic is going to become is more important than strict definitions of what is right and what is wrong. By choosing vengeance, it would corrupt Sonic's virtuous core. It would change fundamentally who Sonic is. Again, you could argue that Sonic was justified in doing what he was doing given the information that he had. I mean, he figured that Shadow might be able to change himself, considering some stuff that happened earlier in the movie. So he kind of had an idea that, hey, Shadow, you don't actually want to do this. You're just doing this because your heart is corrupt right now. But he didn't actually have any, 100% confirmation. And in fact, Shadow was actually a direct threat to him right then and there. So he could have done it, but he asked himself a deeper question, right? What kind of person will I become if I give in to revenge? Aristotle said, you are what you repeatedly do, and that virtue is a habit. So if we think of Sonic's moral character as a kind of slope, then the sort of moral inertia that he's building up by being virtuous would be hindered, would be stopped by this vengeful act, and it would perhaps spiral into something far worse. He could perhaps lose all of his virtuous character that he's building up, and then start to turn towards darkness like Shadow did. So Sonic recognizes that vengeance, while satisfying in that moment, risks transforming him into someone who's ruled by bitterness rather than a sort of personal integrity. So instead of succumbing to his pain, Sonic embodies the Aristotelian idea of Arate, which is the idea that excellence is achieved through virtuous actions. He doesn't merely embody to Shadow the goodness of humanity and the futility of hate. He shows Shadow that you can rise above your suffering. The Sonic movie is telling us to have such an uncorruptible character that no matter what suffering befalls us, that we can choose to rise above that. Sonic's act of sparing Shadow's life, even though he was consumed with hatred, is a living example of what it means to transcend pain and transform your suffering into an opportunity for complete moral growth. The harder the decision of choosing virtuous actions is, the more you will gain from choosing those virtuous actions. So if you're put in a very difficult situation and you choose to be virtuous, you have inclined your spirit to a higher level of virtue than you could have if you were in a position where the virtuous act didn't cost you very much, wasn't very difficult. And in doing all of this, Sonic challenges Shadow to consider his own path. Shadow, who's consumed by grief and vengeance, has allowed his pain to dictate his actions, while Sonic's choice serves as a complete and stark counterpart, illustrating that true strength lies not in succumbing to the darkness, but in resisting it with absolute moral character. Again, this mirrors the Aristotelian belief that virtuous actions can inspire others to seek virtue in themselves, creating some kind of ripple effect of moral improvement. And this also aligns with the idea in virtue ethics that moral responsibility requires more than just adhering to rules or avoiding harm. It actually demands a deliberate choice of cultivating virtue. You're not just stopping bad things from happening, but you're promoting good things to happen. Sonic is encouraging virtues like compassion and forgiveness by doing this, not just avoiding the harm of destruction. And through Shadow's virtuous character, he actually plays a pivotal role in stopping the Earth from being destroyed in the end. So Sonic's moral character action is ultimately rewarded, of course. And we see that Shadow actually holds on to a super form longer than Sonic does, so this moral shift within Shadow actually made Shadow stronger than Sonic. At least this is one way you can look at it, because Sonic actually did win that fight in super form. He punched the Chaos Emeralds out of Shadow and he was about to kill him. So in that moment, in Sonic's rage, he actually became stronger than Shadow, but as we see towards the end, Shadow actually held on to his super form longer, so he actually came right back, circled right back, and became stronger than Sonic. This concept also resonates with Nietzsche's critique of revenge with his concept of the Übermensch. The Übermensch is someone who creates meaning beyond suffering. So while Shadow initially allows the pain to define him, he sees Sonic rise above it, and then he starts to create his own meaning beyond suffering. And in doing this, Shadow demonstrates, and Sonic I suppose, demonstrate that true power, that the greatest power really, lies in self-mastery as opposed to domination or vengeance. Although I would say that it's much different than Nietzsche's Übermensch, because Nietzsche very much relies on you creating values for yourself, whereas Sonic, it has a sort of objective moral principle wherein he believes that Tom's wisdom is the objective standard. Nietzsche also seems to kind of resent the idea of like these passive virtues. He believed that you should have the will and power to create your own morality as opposed to building your morality off resentment, which is his critique of Christianity. He believed that because the Christians were persecuted and powerless and marginalized at the time, the early Christians were persecuted, powerless, and marginalized, that they inverted traditional moral values like strength, power, and nobility, and started celebrating things like meekness and humility and suffering. Now, I have my own critique of that idea, but there is a staunch difference between having the power and choosing to be virtuous, like what we see with Sonic, and not having power and pretending that that's a virtue. If you're more interested in that idea, I did make a video about that, so you can click there if you want to see it. So as we move back on topic, yeah, so whilst pain and grief are inevitable, they don't dictate who you are. So by sparing Shadow, Sonic affirms that moral strength lies not in revenge, but in the courage to transcend suffering. The decision to choose goodness even when giving into anger and bad things would be easier. Sonic is not only a hero, but a guide and a mentor, similar to how Tom was for him, showing that rising above pain is the truest expression of strength, and that choices, even if they're clouded by darkness and a corrupted will, really do define who you aspire to be, and who you are going to be, so you should choose goodness every moment you can. It also brings Sonic's character arc full circle, right? Because the virtues that he learned, he's now espousing and imparting onto other people. There's also this idea that Shadow keeps espousing about how, Maria told her about how the star comes and then it goes, and then by the time you see it, because it's millions of light years away, it might not even exist anymore. I took this to be a metaphor for the fleeting nature of our suffering and our emotions that we feel. That by the time we act out on our emotions, by the time we let our emotions sip in and then we allow them to corrupt us, it might not even matter anymore. That what you're worried about might not even exist anymore. And yeah, that'll be it for the video. Just a quick little off-script sort of thing here. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch you all next time. And probably Happy New Year. I don't know if I'm going to upload a video after this. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But yeah. Alright, bye.